Have you ever wondered why a wild creature would cling to a battered old bag as if its entire world depended on it? On a misty morning in the deep forests of Oregon, that question became the beginning of a story that would change the way one man looked at loyalty, memory, and the quiet forms of love that often go unnoticed. The air was cold enough to make every breath visible, rolling out like thin smoke in front of Officer Nolan as he made his routine patrol along a narrow trail lined with towering fir trees. The forest was still, too still for that early hour, until a faint, wavering sound reached him. It was not the cry of a house cat, nor the roar of a large predator. It was something in between, a trembling tone full of pain and fear. Driven by instinct and years of experience, Nolan followed the sound toward a thicket where the morning fog swirled like pale ghosts around fallen branches. He stepped closer, careful not to startle whatever was hidden within. Then he saw it. A bobcat, lean but muscular, its fur matted with dirt and streaks of dried blood, crouched low with one front paw caught tightly in a rusted loop of wire. Its breathing was shaky, each inhale sounding like it scraped against its ribs.
Yet what struck Nolan most was not its injuries, but what it guarded. Pressed beneath its body, half covered by its trembling paws, was an old canvas bag, stained by mud and dark with age. The bobcat hunched over it protectively, its eyes narrowing each time Nolan took a slow step forward. Most wild cats would flee or fight out of instinct, but this one behaved differently. It refused to leave the bag, even though pain kept pulling at its wounded leg. The moment Nolan's presence grew too close, the bobcat let out a deep, warning growl, not aggressive but desperate, as if begging him not to take away the one thing it still had strength to protect. Nolan froze in place, realizing this was not a simple rescue. The animal was scared beyond reason, yet attached to the bag with a devotion that did not fit the behavior of a predator. He raised his hand slightly, palms open, speaking in a low and steady voice meant to calm rather than threaten. His years on the force had taught him that tone could be as powerful as distance.
As the bobcat continued to shake, Nolan's heart tightened. He could not help remembering another creature he once cared for, a loyal dog, trained for search missions that had stayed by his side for many years before tragedy took it away. The memory softened Nolan's expression, and for a moment, the forest felt smaller, quieter, as though the past and present were blending together in the cold morning air. The bobcat's eyes flicked between Nolan and the bag. They were not the eyes of a wild animal ready to strike. They were eyes full of exhaustion, fear, and something else, something closer to longing. That longing made Nolan realize that the bag was not just an object. It was a piece of the animal's life, something that held meaning powerful enough to override its survival instincts. As he knelt slowly, careful not to startle the cat, Nolan spoke again, letting each word fall gently into the quiet forest, hoping to ease the fear pulsing through the creature's trembling body. The bobcat shifted slightly, but still refused to release the bag. Its body curled around it tighter as a gust of wind rustled the trees overhead. Nolan sensed the urgency of the situation. The injured leg needed attention soon, but any sudden move could push the frightened animal beyond its breaking point. He scanned the forest path behind him and reached for his radio, calling in for backup and specifically requesting the presence of an animal rescue specialist. While waiting, he maintained his stillness, keeping his voice calm, bridging the growing space between fear and trust. Minutes later, the faint crunch of footsteps approached through the undergrowth, slow and deliberate. Nolan did not turn his head, but relief washed over him as he recognized the confident stride of Mira Dalton, one of the county's most skilled wildlife rescuers. Her presence would be the first gentle shift in a long chain of events that would unravel the mystery behind the battered bag and the devoted creature clutching it. Nolan glanced at the bobcat again, noting the quiet tremor in its breath. He whispered, as if speaking to a frightened child, "Stay with me. Help is coming." And so began the story of an animal that remembered too much and a man who could not turn away.
Have you ever wondered how a person's life can shift in a single afternoon? Not through dramatic chaos, but through a quiet realization that rearranges the heart? As Charles sat alone in his dimly lit living room, the soft ticking of the old mantel clock seemed louder than usual, each second nudging him toward a truth he had avoided for years. Time was moving, and he had been standing still. The house, once full of laughter, now felt like a museum of memories, and each room reminded him of the man he used to be before age, loss, and uncertainty dulled the edges of his spirit. But that day, something subtle changed within him, a spark he couldn't fully understand yet, guiding him toward a story he didn't know he was about to enter. It began with a letter he had forgotten to open, one addressed in the familiar handwriting of Eleanor, his childhood friend who had moved across the country decades ago. He held it gently, as though the weight of the paper carried pieces of a life he had let slip through the cracks. The words inside were warm but urgent, describing her recent struggles and the unexpected diagnosis she had received. She wrote not to seek sympathy, but to reconnect before it became too late. Charles felt the room tighten around him as he read the letter again and again, realizing that the world outside his quiet routine still held voices calling his name, inviting him to step forward. With a deep breath, he placed the letter on the coffee table and stood up slowly, as though rising from a long sleep, wondering if this message was meant to guide him back to a path he had once abandoned. Memories drifted back to him, soft and vivid. The summers he and Eleanor spent by the river, the long conversations under fading sunlight, the dreams they shared before adulthood pulled them in different directions. He remembered the promise they made at 17, a simple vow to never lose touch, whispered with sincerity but swallowed by life. The guilt of breaking that promise pressed against his chest, and for a moment he felt the kind of regret that settles deep into the bones. Yet, woven within the regret was something else, something gentler, a sense of possibility stirring in the quiet spaces of his mind. Perhaps reconnecting with Eleanor wasn't just about honoring an old friendship, but about reclaiming a part of himself he had forgotten. As thoughts swirled, Charles moved through his home, touching the edges of frames, straightening books, feeling the weight of years, but also sensing an unexpected lightness emerging between each step. Outside, the evening sky shifted into a deep shade of blue, and the first stars began to appear. He paused by the window, taking in the peaceful rhythm of the neighborhood, wondering how many people around him carried stories waiting to be reopened. He imagined Eleanor sitting somewhere far away, perhaps by her own window, writing that letter with trembling hands, unsure if he would ever receive it or choose to respond. The thought tightened something inside him, replacing hesitation with determination. He reached for the old rotary phone on the counter, hesitated, then dialed the number written at the bottom of the letter. Each ring felt heavier than the last, echoing through the silence, until finally a soft voice answered, gentle yet strained. Eleanor's tone carried the warmth he remembered, but also a tiredness shaped by pain and time. They exchanged greetings that felt both familiar and foreign, like stepping into a room you once knew well, but hadn't visited in years. Their conversation moved slowly at first, carefully navigating the distance built over decades. But soon small laughter emerged, hesitant but real, warming the spaces between them. As she spoke, Charles felt something awakening in him, an old sense of purpose intertwined with compassion. She wasn't asking for rescue or pity, she simply wanted to reconnect before fate limited her chances. And in that moment, he understood why the letter had found its way into his hands exactly when it did. Life, in its quiet wisdom, was calling him to step back into the human world, to offer presence where it was needed most. When the call ended, Charles remained still, holding the receiver as though it were a lifeline pulling him into a new beginning. The room suddenly seemed different, brighter somehow, as if responding to the shift within him. And as he placed the phone back, he realized that this moment, quiet and understated, was the true turning point, the first step of a journey he had long delayed but could no longer ignore.
Have you ever felt a quiet pull toward a place you once knew, as if the past were gently reaching out to guide your next step? That was the feeling that settled over Charles the morning after his call with Eleanor, a soft but persistent nudge reminding him that time was fragile and choices mattered more than he liked to admit. He woke earlier than usual, the pale glow of dawn filtering through the curtains and washing the room with a muted warmth, yet beneath that calm surface was a restless energy urging him forward. As he sat at the edge of his bed, the house felt different, less like a shelter of old routines and more like a starting point for something uncertain but necessary.
The echo of Eleanor's voice lingered in his mind, not in sorrow, but in the quiet strength she carried despite her illness, and he found himself wanting to honor that strength in whatever way he could. He moved through his morning with an unusual sense of clarity, preparing a simple breakfast, packing a small overnight bag, and pausing occasionally as memories rose like gentle shadows, moments he had shared with Eleanor long ago, when both of them believed life would stretch endlessly ahead. While he brewed coffee, he caught himself wondering what she looked like now, how the years might have softened or sharpened her features, and whether she still carried that spark he had admired in their youth. The thought brought a mix of comfort and ache, a reminder that time changes everyone, yet some connections endure quietly beneath the surface. When he stepped outside, the morning air felt crisp, carrying a hint of early autumn. The leaves rustled softly, as though whispering encouragement. His old pickup sat in the driveway, familiar and steady, and as he settled behind the wheel, he felt a sense of purpose bloom within him, subtle but real. He started the engine, listening to its gentle rumble, and began the long drive toward the town where Eleanor now lived. The road stretched before him like an unwritten chapter, weaving through fields, small neighborhoods, and stretches of open land that invited reflection. With each mile, he felt layers of hesitation fall away, replaced by a growing resolve to be present for someone who had once been a cornerstone of his life. As the sun climbed higher, memories surfaced in waves, shared secrets by the riverbank, handwritten notes passed during school days, the way she laughed when the world felt heavy. These recollections didn't weigh him down. Instead, they filled the quiet space of the truck with a warmth that softened the uncertainty ahead. Hours passed in the steady rhythm, the hum of the tires and the gentle sway of the road guiding him toward what felt like both a reunion and a reckoning. When he finally entered the outskirts of Eleanor's town, a mixture of anticipation and worry settled in his chest. He knew this visit might bring difficult truths, yet he also sensed that avoiding them would only deepen the regret he already carried. As he slowed at a stoplight, he realized that this journey wasn't just about seeing her again. It was about facing the pieces of himself he had ignored for far too long, and discovering whether redemption could still find a place in an aging heart. Have you ever stood at the edge of a quiet moment, sensing that something important was about to unfold even before it revealed itself? That was the feeling that settled over Charles as he pulled into the small parking lot of the community center where Eleanor spent her afternoons. The building stood modest and warm against the fading daylight, its windows glowing softly, as if holding the gentle stories of the people inside. Charles turned off the engine and sat still for a moment, letting the quiet hum in his chest settle.
He felt both ready and uncertain, like a man standing between who he had been and who he still hoped to become.
As he stepped out of the truck and moved toward the entrance, each footstep felt deliberate, carrying him closer to a truth he had avoided for far too long. The hallway inside was calm and bright, lined with framed photographs of community events, and as Charles walked past them, he felt a strange tenderness, imagining Eleanor somewhere within these walls, creating small pockets of joy despite her illness. When he finally reached the doorway of the activity room, he paused, smoothing the front of his shirt as though trying to steady the tremor in his breath. Then, with a gentle push, he opened the door.
The room was filled with soft music and quiet conversation, but his gaze went immediately to a woman seated near the window, her posture delicate yet dignified as she worked on a small watercolor painting. Eleanor looked older, of course, but time had not dimmed the warmth in her expression or the calm presence she carried. For a heartbeat, he simply watched her, letting the years between them fall away. And then, gathering his courage, he stepped forward, ready to speak her name and reopen a chapter he once thought had closed forever. Have you ever wondered how a single moment can reshape the quiet landscape of a lifetime? That was the feeling that washed over Charles the instant Eleanor lifted her gaze and their eyes met, as if time itself paused just long enough for them to remember who they once were and who they had become. She smiled, a soft, warm expression touched with surprise, and that single smile loosened something inside him, a knot he had carried for years without realizing how tightly it had been wound. He walked toward her slowly, not wanting to rush the fragile calm of the moment, and when he finally spoke her name, it came out gentle and steady, like a promise. Eleanor set down her paintbrush and reached for his hand, her touch light but sincere, carrying a strength that made his chest tighten with quiet admiration. They talked for a long while, not in hurried sentences or heavy confessions, but in the natural rhythm shared by people who understood that every word mattered. Charles told her about the life he had built, the mistakes he regretted, and the hope that maybe he could still be someone she could rely on. She told him about her illness, not with fear, but with a calm acceptance that came from choosing to live fully in whatever time remained. As the sun dipped lower outside the window, casting a warm glow across the room, Charles realized that the purpose of his journey was not to rewrite the past, but to stand beside her in the present, offering support, companionship, and the simple reassurance that she was not walking this path alone. When they finally rose to leave, he felt lighter, as though the weight of years had gently lifted, replaced by a quiet resolve to make every moment count from this day forward.